Welcome to Lab Notes. I'm Joe Fetterman from Colliers Life Science Advisors, and we're here today with Zevs Sunleaf. Zev leads the commercialization efforts at CHOP, and Zev, we're delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you for the invitation, Joe. Glad to be here.
So Zev, you've got a great story about how it is you got into this whole commercialization game. Let's hear.
So I tell people it's fairly unconventional. Early 80s, I was an undergrad in the College of Business, not in a science background, but in the College of Business, the University of Iowa. I had 2 jobs and could qualify for a 3rd work study job. Ended up working in a biology lab washing glassware, a job I was sure I would keep just long enough until I could find something cooler, and stayed there for 4 years. And by the time I left, I was testing their software, doing some experiments, reviewing things, anything you could do without a degree. And after I graduated a few years later, the PI called me, and the PI is actually from South Philly, born and raised, called me and said, you know, Zev, we want to start a company selling the software that you used to play with and test. You understand just enough of the biology, and you've got a business degree. Do you want to help me run a company? And I thought, well, how wonderfully naive. Let's do that. So, you know, like many of the companies we're talking about, I helped write business plans, helped raise money, helped get a product ready for market, and worked for that company for about 9 years, but had started working with the tech transfer office at the University of Iowa because we had to license the technology into our company. So I learned about technology transfer and commercialization by being an entrepreneur. Throughout those years, that office kept approaching me to jump to the other side of the fence and actually work on the academic side. And after about 9 years, I took that leap. Changed me 1 floor in the building I was in. Worked at the University of Iowa, moving up through various levels for about 15 years. Worked with CHOP on a little project called Spark Therapeutics. Got to know them, and about 5 years ago, they approached me about coming out here, and I said, "What a wonderful new adventure!" And came out here and have loved it.
Well, now that you've mentioned Spark, what a great segue, because when you think about life sciences and you think about CHOP, you can't help but think about Spark. So, are there lessons learned from the Spark commercialization process that have influenced and shaped both from your vantage point and also from the institutional vantage point?
So interestingly enough, I've been here 5 years, so I got here after Spark was started, but I knew Jeff and Kathy and everyone because we also license technology into the company. So I've known them since it began, but I don't have the full view. But I will tell you the one thing I know that they learned was patience. And that the investment doesn't start with the company. The investment starts with the research. CHOP invested a lot of money into gene therapy research a decade ago, really perfecting the craft. And they really wanted to de-risk it as much as possible before they spun out that company to make sure that the science was there. So it's about patience, and it's about really doing your diligence. And at CHOP, we could do the scientific diligence. And when it was time to start a company, I know they brought in other people to do the business diligence to make sure that it was an investable company and a company that could actually had a plan to bring things from the bench to the bedside and really bring things to market.
So, without a doubt, the CHOP success story is a great one, and it brought a lot of funds into the institution. And how have those funds gone to in terms of funding future science and future ventures that are coming out of CHOP and out of your organization?
So those funds have all come back in to help fund additional research throughout the research institute. They're using it over several years in order to help drive breakthroughs at CHOP to positively impact children, increasing clinical trial access, increasing innovation, all the types of things that will help bring the next breakthrough or idea forward.
And Zev, you have a fairly broad organization. There are multiple arms working under your leadership. Let's hear a little bit about that.
So I have three different offices that I lead. One is the Office of Technology Transfer. So it's a fairly traditional patenting, licensing, commercialization, marketing of ideas that are bubbling up, breakthroughs at CHOP. So they're very marketing, analytical, and transactionally based. There's the Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, which is really going through a metamorphosis to become much more startup based. So we are offering more services and more help to PIs at CHOP who want to start companies in the form of funding research and possibly funding startups, but really connecting them to VCs, management, and all the things that you need to be successful. And then the third office is the Office of Collaborative and Corporate Research Contracts. So we are really the front door for companies who want to partner with CHOP, whether it be clinical trials, sponsored research, um, consulting, anything where they want to partner and utilize and partner with the expertise at CHOP to help not only CHOP research flourish, but help research and ideas that are already in industry become optimized and ready for utilization with patients.
Must be a bustling organization. I can only imagine the activity that's going on.
Constantly growing and changing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit in terms of what's bubbling up at CHOP. What are the new up and comers that we might have heard a little whispering about, or maybe haven't heard anything about that we ought to be looking ahead to because that it's really exciting. A remarkable story with Spark. Probably expectations that there's more to come. Whatever you can share. I know we're probably bumping up against the edge of confidentiality, so please share with us what you can. But we're really excited to know that Discovery is thriving at CHOP and what's ahead in the future.
So it's interesting because I often think about startups from an academic or hospital perspective as being in three buckets, at least at CHOP. So one is something like a Spark where CHOP builds that company, creates it, funds it, finds the management, does the first round of investment, is really pushing it forward. Spark was the first example. We've got another one that's still sort of in the silent mode that is approaching clinical trials in the future. But then we have companies where outside investors are coming to us because they recognize the research capabilities, the intellectual property, and the capabilities of our PI. So we've got a company called Orpheon, which again is in that gene therapy space, very similar to Spark. It was started by an external group, and there are CHOP PIs who are part of the advisory board, but it's a gene therapy company getting ready for clinical trials in the next year, looking at ophthalmic and neurological diseases like Batten disease. So again, very much in that gene therapy, that sort of Silicon Valley space. They're in the midst of raising a round right now, like I said, hoping to be in the clinical trials early next year. We've got digital health companies like Phrase Health. So that was very much a PI-driven company. Our offices helped fund some of the development of the code that led to Phrase. The PIs actually left CHOP and have a company on the market with a solution that improves outcomes and decreases inefficiencies in the healthcare market. They've already got that product out into 30 different locations across the US. They're also raising money. And then we've got sort of what we call the pre-startups. Ignis Health is a distinct immune stimulatory pathway company that's just starting to think about how do they put together a business plan to start raising funds. We're helping them get in front of some VCs, get in front of some management to help them get a better chance as they spin out. And then another digital health company called HealthChart, which is part of the chart review process and integrates with interpreting relevant patient data to make the patient experience better. Something, again, that we started using in CHOP, and now we're looking at how do we make this more available to other institutions to improve the patient experience everywhere else. So we really look at things that we invest heavily in, things where other investors come to us, and things that are PI driven. And from gene therapy, vaccines, devices to digital health. So sort of the entire gamut.
You're busy.
we are busy, which is a very good thing.
Yeah, and sounds like there are going to be a number of exciting companies for us to keep an eye on. Some named, some to be named.
Yep.
Zev, thank you very much for being with us. This has been a great look at what you do and what's happening at CHOP, and a look ahead to the future. We appreciate it. We want to continue our conversation in the future, and we appreciate your being part of the Lab Notes community. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Good talking to you.